Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 174. I went solo, and the title of that episode was Pain Has Purpose. And on that episode, I kind of dove into a clip that I saw on social media of George Janko and Candace Owens talking about the value of going through things that are difficult and powering through the pain and understanding that there's always a purpose behind the pain that we have. And I thought it was a really great episode. I thought it was probably one of my better solo episodes, to be honest. But you can check that out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll, should pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So that brings me to today's episode for episode 175, bringing in a fellow podcaster, Junior Lewis.
How are we doing, brother? Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on the podcast, and we have some future collabs coming up as well between ourselves, so
Absolutely.
I'm excited for that. And shout out Zach, who will also be on the podcast eventually, and we'll get the whole crew and we'll do all that stuff. So
Be fun.
I'm glad that we could do this and set this up. And how I like to kind of start the podcast is a little bit of who you are and what you're doing currently.
So I'm Junior Lewis. My first name is actually Jose. I'm a junior, hence Junior. I'm active duty military. I'm from East Providence, so I'm from the local area. Done a little bit of traveling because of the military. Seen a couple things, been a couple places. I as well have a podcast, like you said, Low Gravity Podcast Uncensored. Great time. Big sports guy. Love sports. New England sports, not really my favorite, so I have to pick sports outside of New England. But yeah, man, I live a simple life. Just hang out, really.
Yeah, and we'll dive into each of these aspects, and I'm really excited to dive into the podcasting stuff. And shout out to my buddy Wally and Gio, who will always rag on us when we start having podcasters talking about podcasting. But it's rare when you come across people who do what you do, and you get to kind of pick their brain and talk about stuff like this. And I think it's valuable for ourselves to do this. And I mean, we chatting for like an hour. Obviously, it's our first time meeting, but so many different topics that we could have gotten into. But getting back on track with the podcast, how I like to open up the podcast is I like to discuss family dynamic. And for any new listeners, I like to explain a little bit of why. And I always go with this kind of cliche about it is when you're building a house, you start with the foundation. The foundation is our family, is the family unit, is our family dynamic. And every family is different in how it's created. So I like to kind of just ask a little bit of each guest to kind of explain their family dynamic, just so I can get a better sense of how they're raised and where they're from. And we're talking about your life story here. So I think it creates a fuller picture when we do that. So I'll allow you to take the floor with that. And it's obviously with whatever you're comfortable with. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, foundation is very, very important. First thing that is like my dad came here from Portugal. So big family on his side, 7 kids, including himself. And then my side, him and my mom. It's 5 of us. I have 2 older sisters, a younger brother and a younger sister. I'm the middle child. And then my mom it's her and 2 brothers. So like she has the American side of the family. He's got the European side of the family. But her mom was also Portuguese. So I was raised in a Portuguese household, man. This is the way it's going to be. This is the way it goes. But in reality, like down the line, I mean, when I was a kid, I was like, yeah, why is that way? Come on, we're in America. It's a little westernized. But now seeing it, like as I'm older, I start to realize that a lot of the way that they taught me things morally and ethically, it was for a purpose and it's for a reason and it's for the greater good. I mean, very, very, very family-oriented person. I love being around family. Unfortunately, like my family's not always like that. Like, of course, families have problems and you may not see some aunties and cousins. And like, at least for me specifically, like my parents are divorced. Like, so they got divorced, I want to say when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, got back together when I was in high school, tried it again, didn't work out. Whatever, it is what it is. But they did it for the kids. So I understand like family aspect wise, they're always trying to put the family first. And I respect that. And like we were talking about family earlier, like family's a big deal. Like you want to be a dad, I want to have a family, I want to be a dad. And one thing I always want to preach to my kids and my family later is like, I've seen things growing up and I've seen mistakes, and I want to learn from those mistakes through others and not make those same mistakes when I'm a father. So, yeah, no, family, like you said, foundation is important. And those lessons that you learn from maybe the cracks in the foundation, fixing the foundation, maybe fixing the house later on, those are things that you need to take consideration and accountability for later on when you have your own family.
Yeah, I'm glad that you felt comfortable enough to share that, because I think that's important stuff to hear. Is everyone's family dynamic is different, and especially nowadays where they talk about divorce is very heavy in a lot of different family households and stuff like that. I've had several different guests talk about their parents' relationship and things like that, and it's always good for me to hear that perspective, because luckily enough for me, my parents stayed together and are together, and that was huge for me. And to hear that your parents definitely tried to put the kids first seems like it was a positive thing for you guys, and I think that's what most parents should try to do if they're
Mm.
able to. Obviously,
Yes.
every relationship's different, but it's really the kids that are most affected when things go badly, not even the parents, and they don't sometimes see it, because obviously when you're dealing with shit, it's hard to see outside of your own shit to see what's affecting like your children or other people. So it sounds like they were able to, for the most part, try to shield you guys from whatever difficulties their relationship might have had at the time. And it seems like you guys have come out really great, especially just talking to you and some of the
Appreciate
stuff that we have shared values on.
it.
And a lot of those values typically stem from how we were raised as children. And I think that's really great that you were able to kind of dive into that and talk about that. How about the relationship with your siblings and being a middle child?
Yeah, being a middle child is interesting. I'm the oldest boy, and like I said, like European families, like if you're the oldest boy, head of household, like especially afterwards, when my parents got divorced, like that was one of the things I took extremely seriously. It's just like being the oldest boy, like there's some responsibilities, some things that you take on your shoulders now that your dad's not in the house. So like even like I know this sounds cliche, but something even as simple as like taking out the garbage or like cleaning up or making sure like my brother's good or my sister's fine. Like, and now that I'm older, like I see it a lot more because like I'm 23 years old. I'm with my parents, and like those values start to come out more, especially when you start to get older. Because now, like within that European family, like you're a provider in reality, like you're a provider, but that's also the way that America looks at men, like just providers. But that's another conversation we can get in later on, because it's like in reality, like yeah, we're providers, we have like, but we have feelings too, shit still goes on and we still need to be heard. I'm not just here to just provide, but I'm also here to like be a pillar and uphold my family and uphold my family's values.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's kind of part of the dialogue that I've had with this podcast is kind of men and their emotions, men and their feelings. Like we feel too, we have stuff too, and that has, I think, the movement of men's mental health has definitely taken leaps and bounds over the last several years, and I think it's really great that a lot of people have been able to kind of speak about how they feel. I think a mutual guest and friend that we've had, John Sisto, came on the podcast, and I think when someone like him, obviously, if you look at his physical stature, you might be like, "Oh, this is a tough
This big
and
guy,
big
yeah.
guy." But when he came on my podcast recently and kind of shared some of the stuff that he had gone through recently, and I think that really helps with moving the conversation of this forward. And this is the type of stuff that I really enjoy talking about, is because there's two sides of it too. Then we talked about this off podcast
Mhm.
with kind of like the provider, traditional masculine father role that I do believe that most fathers should have. You should
Absolutely.
be that guy, and but you should also make sure you have a place for you could feel your stuff too. And obviously, it depends on your partner. Make sure you pick the right partner and you have the right people around you as well. But having a space to be that masculine role model, but also be
Be able to
uh,
be vulnerable.
vulnerable, and you want to have a relationship with your kids and care for them and love them, and not just be the disciplinarian and when you're yelling at them all the time and all they know you as is that you're going to put them in timeout, quote unquote, or whatever.
Yeah.
You want to have a positive relationship with them, and I think them seeing you feel or seeing them how you love your wife or whatever helps with that too as well. And I think there's a swing in families and people being more aware and how to be better parents in general happening in our society. And I think it's really great that that kind of is happening all around, and these conversations are happening, because I think discussing gender roles and what the family structure should look like or what it could be is important to always check in on what different things should happen in terms of family. And as we're talking about family and progressing with our conversation, I typically always look at childhood and kind of sports, hobbies, friendships. So for you, how did you make friends? What kind of sports or hobbies did you play growing up, and how did those all correlate?
So East Providence is small, man. Everyone knows everyone. It was really easy for me to make friends. I'm very, I would consider myself outgoing. Like I can speak to basically anyone. I'm not saying I can go sell you anything, but I'm saying I can speak to anyone. But sports really helped. Yeah, definitely. I love sports. I'm an athlete at heart. I'll always try to be an athlete at heart. I'll be 50 and I'll still try to keep up with the 20-year-olds. I don't care. But football really was a big part growing up. Football was That's where I met a lot of my friends, but also soccer. Um, Even Zach, like that's who I met through soccer. I was telling you that earlier. Like the friend I've had the longest, 20 years now, met through soccer. My best friends met through football, and then obviously like small town went to elementary school together. So it's like, hey man, remember the game Sunday? And we're speaking about it, and everyone like that's just like a big thing, man. There's like popularity was through sports. So I'm now looking back on, I'm like, damn, like you had to play sports to be popular. That's so sad. But then like when you get older, like there's other values to things, and that it's not just sports. But yeah, that's how I met a lot of my friends through sports.
Yeah, and a lot of the reason that I tackle this topic is I think there's a very clear difference, and I'm saying this, trying to say this like positively and politely, between people who played sports and didn't play sports. The values that you learn from sports are different than something you might learn in some other type of a hobby and activity. And not like those hobbies and activities can't teach what sports do, but sports teach a lot. And specifically for me, and especially now that you mention it, football. The game of football teaches me way more than any other sport ever taught me because the physicality of it, the mental grind of it. I played my entire life from pretty much Pop Warner all the way up to
Pop water.
senior year. And the struggles that you go through, getting hit in the mouth on days you're going to get
It's not
popped by
fun.
certain people, the practices, the conditioning, the dog weeks, the the struggle and the grind of a season, especially when you're losing, like how to lose, like there's stuff that you can't really learn through other sports. And there's this kind of like team family building through football. It's like when you go through something with someone,
You're going through it together.
you're going through it together. And this kind of will build maybe into like the military stuff later on because I think that kind of correlates really well
Big time.
with people in the military. My brother was former in the Navy as well. He got out a few years ago, but a lot of the stuff that he talked about was similar to that. Is the some of the values that they teach you kind of coincide or correlate to football or sports in general. Is
Big
that
time.
camaraderie, the togetherness, and I think what we're missing in this society is some of that togetherness and uniting under a common goal or a belief system or whatever it could be
Exactly.
is that part of things. Um, for sport wise, did you prefer football or soccer over each other?
Uh, I preferred soccer. I mean,
Oh, that's
so
tough to
like,
hear. That's tough to hear. You're one of
bro, but
those.
like I'm gonna be honest with you. I loved football. Like I loved playing football, especially when I started getting good at it. Because when I first started, I sucked. I sucked. But when I first I had a coach that really like put some confidence in me because I was not confident at all. But I had a coach. His name was Pat. He was a safety coach, and he really put some confidence in me. And I was playing safety at the time, so like I'm small now. Like I'm not a big guy, but when I was obviously younger, I was smaller. I was smaller than some of the people, but then I realized like I have height and I have speed. Like I can really hit somebody. And then when he really started to put that in me, I didn't care who I was hitting. So when he put that in me, like I was like, damn, I'm gonna be the best damn safety in Pop Water, man. But and on top of that, the camaraderie, man, I was playing with my best friends. Like my best childhood friends were on my team. My best friend's playing cornerback and I'm playing safety. Like what's better than that? Like playing the same play, like getting an interception together, making a tackle together, or like even like he also played running back at the time, and I was like, let me get in running back too. Just getting it was just being a kid is you never want to take that away from a grown man because like eventually like we're gonna give that to our kids, right? And just what we learn, what we see, getting excited for other people. It's just it brings like a smile to my face knowing that like one day I can then teach and like see this again through another person's view.
That's perfectly said. Is you want to let the kids be kids, let them learn, in huge part, let them fail. That's been something that in this participation trophy society, I think it's getting somewhat better. I want to say, but obviously, I don't have any cousins or stuff in this young sports era. But I remember as I was getting older, like everyone was getting trophies for everything, and like that's just not
Yeah,
the way
no.
to let it happen. I remember a lot of my motivation to play sports was losing. Like I would lose a lot. I was on some bad fucking teams, but like wanting to win, that motivating factor to always come back and try harder was always there. Getting in the batting cages during baseball season, cause like I'm gonna win it this year. I'm gonna try to win. Never win, or like there was one year and like we had like our senior league where it's like 15 and 16-year-olds with some like 13 and 14-year-olds as well, and we had like the best fucking team. Like picked like all great players, all my friends. Like we were fucking stacked. Joked around all year, lost like one game, get to the championship, lose. And I was
Yeah,
just
that's
like,
the toughest part.
and it's like there's lessons to be learned in that too. It's like it's not just about the sport sometimes, it's also about having that journey of being a kid and going through these sports and learning how to have fun and how to apply yourself in different aspects is super important. And when you remove that from kids, it's dangerous. And we're starting to see some of the ramifications of not pushing kids in sports, not pushing them to their fullest potential. And the internet and social media coming into play, and video games also being a huge factor. Obviously, we had video games growing up, but now it's bigger than ever. Like obviously games
Big
like
time.
Fortnite, Call of Duty, and obviously GTA series is obviously a huge one. But like these games and obviously sports like Madden and 2K and FIFA, but these games come into it and take away from people playing sports. And there's so many different aspects they can go on this rabbit hole of sports and children and allowing them to be kids. But I want to continue with our conversation because I really want to get to like the military aspect and talk about social media and podcasting and stuff. But as we're progressing through these sports and through your life story here, we're getting towards high school, your senior year. Talk to me a little bit about that and kind of where your vision was post high school.
So high school, man. High school was great. I loved high school. I loved every second of it. Like I remember the first thing someone told me when I got into high school was, "This is gonna be the fastest 4 years of your life, and you're not gonna think so now because you're a freshman. But I promise you, you're gonna get to the end of the 4 years and be like, damn, this was quick." And it was, and I'll never forget that. And I miss it, like truly. But it's one of those things that never come back. But still got my same friends, luckily, for the most part. But learned a lot. Going into high school, man, soccer was everything to me. Like again, I was a huge athlete. I based my life, my grades, my schedule, everything was around soccer all year. Whether it be high school soccer, traveling, competitive, everything was soccer. I told my dad, so like I wanted these $300 pair of cleats, right? And I told my dad, like, if I make varsity my freshman year, which I did, I was swinging, so I was playing both JV and varsity. It's like, you have to get me these cleats. Made him buy me these cleats, and like that's who I started to become. Was like from that moment on, I started to become goal driven. I started to give myself short term, long term, midterm goals. Like my long term goal that like when I was a freshman was I seen these captains and I was like, I'm gonna be a captain. I'm gonna be a captain senior year. And this wasn't based on my performance. This I'm gonna grow with this team and I'm gonna grow with these people that I came here with and we're gonna win something our senior year. Did it end up happening? No, but I learned so many lessons, like you were saying, from those losses because I couldn't have learned those lessons if I didn't play, if I didn't have those goals, if I didn't take soccer seriously. So like all through high school, I mean, like I had girlfriends and whatever, but high school relationships, you learn things from that, and it teaches you to grow up. But soccer was very it was my bread and butter. So um, my junior year, my coach allowed me to still swing and play JV and varsity. And he said, for like your development, because these are the guys that you came up with, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna allow you're gonna be the captain of the JV team, 11th grade, and then go to senior year, which they already elected captain. So I was captain for the varsity team the following year too. So I ended up getting 2 years of being captain under my belt, and moved up with the same team. We went so far in that junior year season. Like you were saying, man, it was like one of those things where it's like we joked around. We had this great camaraderie and banter all year. We were just whooping teams, LaSalle, like it was bad. Like, and then we got to playoffs, and it not that it backfired, but it was one of those things where it's like these are teams that we've been beating all year. Why are we struggling come playoffs? That's because it's a different animal. Like it's a different dog, and that really like translated to how I started taking things seriously going forward from that. Because it was like whether I was whooping someone 6-1 in postseason, that's still going to translate. I'm not going to let off the gas come playoffs, or even like later on in my life. Now I'm not going to let off the gas later on. Like if I achieve something, I'm not going to sit back and be like, all right, cool, I achieved this. Let me relax. No. Like it's full press. Like we need to keep pressing. It's not done. There's always something more to achieve. So I learned a lot from high school. I learned a lot from sports, from my friends, and I'm grateful for the experience.
Yeah, it kind of goes into almost like Mamba mentality a little bit. It's like it doesn't matter if you win or lose, you're still grinding. Like it's the constant pursuit of that. And I felt like I had a pretty similar experience for football wise. Probably not in success wise. We one of those stories of like you had probably some of the best talent to ever walk through the building and just couldn't put it together. Just guys' heads are in different places. Uh, Not buying in. Head coaching change mid year, like our junior year. Just people. Everything was there for us to be successful. They adjusted like the conferences and everything. Like the path to play at Gillette Stadium was all there. All we had to do was win a few games. And we just couldn't get our heads out of our ass, and it's just constant shit after shit. But going through that, and I eventually became captain uh my senior year, and I got some experience being a captain like freshman team and JV and working my way up in varsity and junior year trying to like it was like some game day captains and stuff like that. So I got experience in some leadership roles where you have to try to get these guys to buy in, and these guys are not the type
It's a
to buy in
difficult
all the
task.
time, especially when you're in high school and there's a lot of other distractions out there and other sports you want to play and shit like that. It's like it's hard to get guys to see the picture. Like especially when you care so much about the thing. Like this is almost like this is like you said you plan your schedule around it. Like this is like everything. You're great. Everything's into this sport, but that's not the case for everybody. And that was something that I was able to take away from football was like not everyone's going to care how you care, and you can't expect them to do that either. Like that's unrealistic of you to expect them to want what you want, to do what you do. Like that's everyone's different. Everyone has different goals and dreams and aspirations, and some people might just want to show up, play their sport, get their good grades, or not get good grades, and then go do what they want to do
Yeah.
post high school, and that's fine. You have to let people be what they want to be, and I was able to take that from sports. Is I can work as hard as I can do. I control what I can do, but you have to let like your environment be your environment. You just got to be able to operate in that environment. And I think that's a good thing you could take away from sports or losing seasons or bad teams. Like those experiences definitely help move the things forward and move the needle forward. But when we're talking about getting ready to graduate, talking about college, maybe not college, what kind of path do you take and kind of walk me through that decision to do
Yeah.
that?
So, like I had mentioned earlier, I ended up joining the military. So, I actually, at 17, I enlisted in the military. So, it was before I even got out of high school. I enlisted rather. This was part of a lot of the reason why I decided to do that is because my grandfather, me and him had a really good relationship. I was extremely, extremely close to my grandfather. He ended up passing away a couple of, I want to say when I was in high school. I can't remember the year, but I promised him that I'd join the military. And I said this because again, I had such a good relationship with him, and he was in the military, and like everything, like morally, that I knew about him was stemmed from the military. Like we'd always have conversations about the military, and like one of the things that always stood out to me about my grandfather is that like again, I have a European like tough male family, right, my dad's side, but my grandfather. Not to say that my dad didn't ever say that he was proud of me, because he did, but my grandfather, I remember one day he told me, he was like, "You have a good head on your shoulders." My dad never said that to me. Not to say that like my dad's a bad dad, or like he didn't never say anything, or like grace me or whatever, but I was like, damn, like I've never, no one's ever said that to me before. So like, and that's when I was in like 8th grade, and I remember that like vividly. I could remember that till like the day I die. But I'd always talk to him about joining the military, and I told him like I'd always join, and like even when he passed, like that was still my promise to him. Like even in my cap and gown, like in my cap, there was a letter wrote by him. I put it in my cap. He was a big fan of Frank Sinatra. On the top of my cap was Frank Sinatra, and I said I did it my way because that's the way that I want to live my life because of him. Like do things the way you see fit, but do it for the right reasons. So like my first step and my foundation for my life is through the military, because it taught him all these lessons. I seen the amazing man that he grew up to be, and I want to be the same way. And I also take other lessons from my parents and my uncles and other family, but now also the people I know in the military now. So yeah, the military has been a blessing.
Yeah, and that even kind of builds off of what we were talking about earlier with um, traditional father figures and things like that. That emotional side, to be able to just say to you, you have a good head on your shoulders. Traditional masculinity probably would not push for that. They're
No.
not going to tell you to tell your son that. They're going to tell him to push him harder. And it's not right or wrong because obviously good things can come from that as well. But to hear that, it can be very rewarding. And obviously for you, it helped push you onto a career that's very rewarding and it's leading you probably to very great things. And I think again, also thank you for your service for
Appreciate that.
enlisting because obviously it's a lot to ask people to enlist into the service. And people don't understand, I don't think nowadays, the amount that you have to put in, your personal sacrifice to do that. Doesn't matter what branch you go into. You're sacrificing on some level your own personal freedom because at a certain point you have to go do things for them. Like it's just part of the contract you sign. And obviously it's a job and things like that nature. But I think there's a lot more to it that people need to be more appreciative of, especially if you get into like veterans and the way this country treats veterans. There's a lot of negative things that are associated with that, and especially the mental health side of that. Especially when you talk about PTSD and things of that nature, I think it's very sad the stance that our country has taken, almost turning their backs on the people that serve for this country. I don't think that is the path forward either. I think giving back to those people who sacrificed for us is definitely the way that we should approach that. But in terms of your service, when you actually had to go to, they call it boot camp as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you went to boot camp, talk to me about that feeling
Oh,
because I can
man.
imagine that was probably a lot for you to kind of comprehend.
And I remember like it was yesterday, man. I left out of Boston, and dude, it was just like a lot of emotions. I was nervous, but I was excited to now like start my life. I remember on the plane ride there, it was just like I don't even know what to expect. It was just like you're jumping into the unknown, and like I went with luckily like a group of guys, and we were just it was banter already. So that started my military career, just banter already. So it was like I went from soccer banter now to military banter, and it was great. Basic training was it was rough. It was rough being away from home. The physical aspect wasn't hard. It's doable. Like anyone can get through the physical aspect, but it's that mental aspect, that mental blockage that really stops a lot of people from their potential, especially in the military. Being away from home now, knowing your active duty and not knowing where you're going to be stationed because you know you're not going to go home now for the remainder of your contract. And that didn't really hit me until after boot camp. We go to a training called tech school or like your A school for certain like the Navy and like the Army, but um that is your job. So then you start to learn your job and the technical aspect of that, and that's when you get your orders to go to your duty station following your tech school. And my duty station happened to be Nebraska. I put in for everything in the Northeast region, and I didn't get accepted. And that's when it really hit me. Like, damn, like I'm never going home again unless it's for like 2 weeks at a time. And like not to say that that didn't mess with me because it did. And it was a lot for an 18-year-old to then comprehend that. And like I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the people around me. A lot of some of the older guys who were just joining the military, maybe even for fun. They took notice of a lot of us young guys who came in and like they had talks with us and really took us under their wing and started to explain like this is the things you need to look out for financially. Like and we get this is gonna be your first day away from home, and our instructors also helped with that because like especially for like lifelong guys who were in the same situation and think like these guys lifelong they've like 20 years think 20 years from now or 20 years from what that time was in 2019 these guys seen Desert Storm, Desert Shield. They've been to Iraq, Afghanistan. These guys have dealt with contact and firefights and like so. I took a lot of what they had to say seriously, especially going to my first duty station. I had a lot of mentors, a lot of people that I can reside in, that I could talk to about how I felt about being away from home because these are guys that they've been away from home and they understand it. They've and like for those older vet guys, like they've done it to a deeper extent, like not even knowing if they were going to come home from a foreign country. Like it's a lot. It's a lot. I would say it's not, and people can take this how they want. Like it's not for the weak minded, but I'll tell you that if you come in there and you're open to change and you want to be bigger and you want to be better and you want to be more mentally sound, I'd say that the military is the place to be, especially with now being able to speak about how you feel. Whereas before, like in the military, PTSD wasn't a thing, shell shock wasn't a thing. Like they didn't believe in that. You just killing people and you get over it in World War II, like whatever. Now it's a lot more accepting because the way that the United States is moving and the way that we're taking care of our veterans now mentally, like it's improved a lot. It's improved a lot. There's a lot of things that like we do resilience training to make sure everyone's like mentally sound, to make sure everyone's good. It's okay to take a knee. It's okay to take a step back, like because we need those things, and it's important. And then now that's also important for when you get out because a lot of people like they struggle to do that portion. They struggle to then go into a regular civilian job and be part of society because all we know is the military lifestyle. It's not even just a job anymore. It's a lifestyle. Like they tell you when to sleep, when to eat, what your schedule is, what you can do, what you can't do, what you can say, what you can't say. Like it's a lot. And then you leave and now you're just faced with the real world.
Yeah, how did it help you alter your perspective on not only like your life, but maybe the country and like how you wanted to approach like your future?
So like, dude, I love America. I'm gonna be honest, America's the best fucking country around. I have an American flag tattooed on me. That's how serious I am about this shit. But like my perspective as a whole of America, I think that there's a lot that needs to be done with the people. I think that we need to find a common ground. I think that there needs to be a goal that's set and everyone understands this to put their personal biases aside to understand like there are things in the next year to 2 years that are going to be at stake and that includes our freedom. And some people just need to accept that. And to put your personal biases aside to come towards a goal to make sure your neighbor and the people around you are good, that's something that needs to be done. And my perspective on that has changed because before I was in high school, I was like, yeah, America's fine. But then like now being in the military and seeing the political aspect and seeing what people really think, and yeah, it's definitely it's eye opening. And like if I could have everyone just like look into the news, and I know that that's scary because like a lot of the news sometimes is like it's filtered or maybe they say things that they shouldn't or that's not true or but like find a source, find a person in the military, ask them what's actually going on, especially if they know because you see a lot of stuff around here, man. Like especially like the guy, and I don't want to get too deep into this, like the guy that just burned himself for like the Free Palestine thing is just insane, and then more details come out. It's a lot. It's a lot. Like propaganda is it's up here right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a climate where people will act for social media, for
Big
their
time.
things, and um, it requires more of us as individuals to look into stuff. And quite frankly, people don't have time to do that too.
No, people
And
don't want to.
and that's like the unfortunate thing is we live in a society that grabs headlines. We look at the first thing we see on X or on Instagram, and it's just like, all right, that must be true. I saw it online. I saw Forbes posted this. This must be real. Like Forbes, Bloomberg, they're all bought and paid for. Like they all have an agenda. All these different organizations going all the way to the top. There's a drive for all this. I was actually watching with my girlfriend this documentary, which was crazy. It was it's on Netflix. It's like 3 episodes. It's like cons, killings, and kidnapping or something. And it's like these cult schools that will abduct children and bring them to these schools and run them like military,
Yeah.
but they're not educators. And the political ties that are involved in this is crazy. Like there's pictures of like Mitt Romney and stuff on there. It's like, dude, like some of this is probably tied to child trafficking on top of this. And it's like
You see it all the time now.
I've seen videos on even on TikTok of people talking about like they get kidnapped and brought to the woods and they have to just because they're bad kids and like they're typically not bad kids. They just parents that don't know how to fucking deal with their kids. But this politicized view of our country has changed dramatically probably since 2016.
Big time.
And for better or worse, we're facing this probably the biggest election that we've had in years.
Something
And
needs to change.
possibly ever. We don't really know what's going to happen going forward. And I think this election, this political cycle, we need to pay attention to stuff. You need to pay attention. And I would say good outside media sources. Look at different podcasts. I personally love PBD podcast. I love Tim Pool. I like these type of guys. I do like somewhat of what Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and I even like a little bit of what Chris Cuomo says. I'd like someone that will go across aisles and talk to people. And he's gone on I'll just say PBD because I can never get his name right. But he did a podcast with him and Candace Owens, and they did like a whole live podcast, and people booed him, and he sat there and took it and talked about his point of view. And whether you agree with it or didn't, he was like, you guys don't hate me though. You just disagree with what I'm saying. And everyone agreed. And I think what you're saying is that common ground where you might disagree with someone's point of view and where they stand, but you shouldn't hate them. Exactly. It gets back to being Americans. Why are we all here? We all live in this country, and so should support the same thing in that aspect, is this country and this freedoms and the right to be who we want to be and believe in what we want to believe, but under the guide that we're Americans. And that has been lost over the last decade or two. Yeah. And I would agree with you in a lot of probably the stuff that we don't have to say on the podcast, but politically and like where we need to go as a country, we need to come together. And that's a big thing. And I usually don't talk too deep into politics, but I think that's an important sentiment to say, is like the come togetherness almost. We need to get to some common ground and agree on certain things. And this even gets to some of the stuff that I talk about faith, where I think part of what's missing is the belief in something. We don't believe in anything anymore. No. There's not used to be religion. I'm not saying religion is the answer, but
that was our common ground.
That's the common ground
together. Yeah,
exactly. And I think there needs to be more of that within our society, and it's definitely interesting to see that and to hear that from your point of view as someone who's active duty, who's serving. And I want to ask you a little bit about your first location at Nebraska, that experience, because obviously you're finally out of boot camp, you're out of school, now you're at your first I can't think of the word,
duty station.
Yeah. So how was that for you?
Oh man, that was different, coming from a small town. Like, I say small town, but really like it's just a city around here. Providence is a city. East Providence is really a city. Seekonk is a small town, but even then, like,
it's becoming a city.
A city. So then to go into Nebraska and it just being cornfield, I was like, I'm not used to this at all, because I was just in Texas. I was in San Antonio. Like, you're in a city. You're not, downtown's not too far. Like, Nebraska was not it. It's like big, long roads that lead to absolutely nowhere. Walmart is 15, 20 minutes away. Like, it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. I spent a lot of my time working, and like, that was fine. Like, I was learning my job, and I like enjoy it, and I enjoyed it then. And the camaraderie that's when I really started to see it, is that like one of the big things about the military is resilience and embracing the suck together. So like, as soon as I got to my duty station, as soon as I got to the team that I was on, like they welcomed me with open arms. And I can still say proudly to this day that I'm still close with a lot of those guys. I talked to one of them last week, and my supervisor at the time is now like one of my close friends, and now we're the same rank. So it's like, who would have knew 5 years ago that me and him would be the same rank? And I've learned all this stuff from him, and now we're neck and neck. But like, he'll always be my supervisor. He'll always be a good friend of mine, and I'll always thank him for what he's bestowed upon me in regards to knowledge of the military, but also like giving me that voice to then like be able to tell him like the struggles that I'm going through while I'm there. Cause I'm an 18-year-old kid, bro. I don't know anything about being away from home. Yeah, sure, I'm good with money. I can save money, and like, that's fine. But like, emotionally, I was distraught. But then I got used to it. You know, it's one of those things that you have to get used to. It's like we were talking about earlier, just grow a pair and just get to work. Like, cause that's really like, that was the only way I was going to get to it. Like, I couldn't sit there and feel bad for myself that I'm away from home. I put myself in that situation. I volunteered. So let's make the best out of it. And that's what it was. I ended up meeting some great people, learned a lot of great things. And dude, it was just, I never watched college football until I started hanging around with them. Like, a lot of my friends were from Georgia and Alabama, and like, it was either Roll Tide or Go Dogs. And I was like, I'm from Boston, because no one knows where Rhode Island is. So I was like, I guess I'm a Bama fan. Roll Tide.
It's so funny when you go away. Like, can't really say that you're from, I'm from Seekonk. Everyone's like, no, you're the Boston guy. It's like, all right, cool. Like, I'll roll with it. And then luckily back when I moved away to Texas, luckily the Patriots were still good at the time. And Red Sox, I'm pretty sure they won the World Series one of those years that I was away. But to kind of be that Boston guy in a different place was kind of cool for a little bit. Was to just like to be able to like give the jabs. Oh yeah, we won this many Super Bowls, or
Yeah, I was,
we're
I
always
was that guy.
but like you kind of I loved that role. It was like it was fun, but to go off that, I think one of the important things is moving away. Whether you're moving away from the military, college, a job, it's important to get away from where you're from because that will create perspective.
Absolutely.
It creates new lessons and new experiences with other people, and you get to see how they live and how they grow up, and that teaches you. You can learn from that. And then if you decide to move back and come back home to where your hometown is, you can apply those lessons and become a different person and become better essentially because you're going through these different things that most people don't go through. Because, like you said, you're going to go through those experiences where you're sad, where you're alone, where no one that you know is around you. And on some level, you have to just get through it. And having people around you that you meet, whether it's through your job or through activities outside of work, it's important because those people will help you get through those dark periods where you're away from your family and friends. And but just moving away is so key to growing up, and I think that's an important aspect that you kind of hit on with the military too. Um, kind of, I want to shift towards the back end of this conversation to get towards the stuff I've been dying to talk about, the podcast.
The good old podcast.
So talk to me about the podcast and how this kind of came to be.
So again, like, yeah, me and Zach have been friends for 20 years, and we talked about this a bit earlier, but we always wanted to start something together, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a gaming channel, whether it just be whatever, YouTube, like exploring, whatever the case may be. But we just, in high school, we just didn't have the time because me and him are both soccer players. And again, earlier, I took soccer super seriously. So like when we weren't just hanging out as friends, where was I? I was at the field, so I didn't have time to do this, and I didn't have the connections either. And then finally, I came back, got stationed at home, and then we were just talking one day, and he was like in the process of renovating his apartment, and we were just like, let's start a podcast. It's about time we should start a podcast. We have all the equipment. Like his dad was a DJ, Zach was a DJ, and he was like, yeah, we can start it. But the struggle is the name. Like you need to have something catchy. Like the Carroll Connections is catchy. Like it's a deeper meaning, but what's the meaning behind us? And Zach had a YouTube channel, which was Gravity. And we threw the idea at each other, and he was like, let's do it. But we needed to add something more. Like, what could we add? All right, Low Gravity. All right, cool. That sounds fine. Low Gravity Podcast. We have to put the podcast in there. You need to be able to identify yourself. Then we just threw the Uncensored in there because we talked about it earlier. Like, our podcast is uncensored for a reason. Like we want people to come on and be themselves and be able to like slip up and swear. Not that that's like a slip up, but feel comfortable enough to like, because that's also part of like like being yourself and being vulnerable is being able to speak freely and truly emphasize things that you want to speak about or like even like to get like a grasp, a picture of a funny moment. Sometimes you need to swear. Sometimes you need to say a little more. Something you don't have to feel filtered. And a lot of like what society is now and like why we specifically put uncensored is there is because society's uncensored or society's censored rather, and we're not that person. Like when did we ever get to the point where we can't feel comfortable to say how we feel, even if it's something that you don't like, or if I don't like, or he, she, them don't like it shouldn't matter at all. Yeah, that's where we're at. Not to get on a rant, but that's where we're at.
No, and I agree with that. And that's kind of a similar mindset that I've kind of come with the podcast is I want people to say what they want to say. Like swear if you want to swear. Like, I mean, I clearly swear. I swear like a fucking sailor. And like, that was one of my early critiques by my mom was just like, you should probably not swear as much. I'm like, this is how I talk. Like, I swear. Like, this is just part of my persona. And like, I don't want to change that when I come on a podcast. Like, I want to be me on the podcast. And I think being your authentic self when you're creating content is so important because if you're putting an image out there that's not you, your audience is going to see that. They're going to be like, yeah, he's kind of playing a character. I don't know if he's really being himself. And you want your audience to resonate with something about you, whether it's the things you say, the things you do, whatever. They want to feel connected to you in some type of way. And if you're not being yourself, you're going to connect with the wrong people that don't embody who you are.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a difficult aspect of content is trying to figure out who you are. and what you want to talk about. So like, how did you guys like narrow down what you want to talk about? And like, do you even narrow it down, or do you just let it rip on any given episode?
Yeah, so it really gets down to like who we have on. So I mean, we are selective on who we have on because like and I say this because me and Zach are really big on like you are who you're around, right? So if like you're hanging around with punks, the likelihood is you come on the podcast, you're gonna bring up one of these punks and you're gonna talk about something that we don't and really society doesn't want to hear. And I say this like some people that associate music or rap with guns, violence, drugs, all this other stuff. So like when we have artists on, like we snoop around on their social media to see if like for example, I'm not gonna name any names, but someone specific had them pointing a gun as on their profile picture but wanting to get on the podcast, and I was like, no, that's a bad image not only for us, that's a bad image for you, but that's also we're not trying to portray that here. Like we're not trying to send this message that you're some great guy or that you're just here to promote your music. Like the point of the podcast is to really and thoroughly get to know somebody and have them open up to who they are because that's also how you market yourself. Not only do we want to know the product, yeah, but we really want to know the person behind the product, the person that's giving us this music, the person that's making these videos, the athlete that went through the struggles of where they're at now. Like we want to know these things because these are the things that matter. I don't want to play this picture like we're the paparazzi and I just want to know about tonight's performance. You dropped a triple double and all this. No, I want to know what was your mindset going into that triple double. How do you feel afterwards? What was the off season like? Like what's your personal life like? What are some funny moments that you remember growing up? Like all these other things. So yeah, the podcast is it's opened up a lot to that. Like to answer that question, we're very selective. But yeah, it is like one of those things where it's like there's no script. Just come in, we'll have a conversation, and as soon as we have that conversation rolling, click the record, and it just becomes raw because we're already in a conversation. I mean, you're already comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's cool to see that different perspective on podcasting, where on the opposite side, where like obviously I gave you kind of like the script prior, but it's like a script for I'm just a very structured person. Like I want to make sure I talk about all the
hmm
talking points that I have, and
Especially for episode 1, like you said,
yeah,
it
and
matters.
the way that I've structured this podcast is in some form or fashion. This first episode when people come on is I'm documenting their life in some form. So like I want to make sure that we're hitting the points that are most important for them within the hour that I'm recording, because obviously you can get into the conversation of longer and longer podcasts. Your audience is going to drop and drop
Yeah,
the
we
more
see
you go,
that.
and it's like I would love to sit here and have 3-4 hour podcasts with people, but the editing, all the other parts of it, people are not going to listen to the whole
Yeah.
3-4 hours. It's like I'm not Joe Rogan, not yet, so like that's not happening. But I like to keep the structure there for myself to make sure I'm hitting the right points and portraying their life story in like the correct way, because I'm a podcaster, host, interviewer in a sense where I'm interviewing you, but I'm trying to help you. I'm guiding you in like painting this picture basically of what your life is and allowing you to paint whatever you want to paint, but give you at least like the template to paint it on.
hmm
And that has always just really worked for me. And the way I do it, I've had friends that do similar to what you do, talk, and then just hit record and just go with it. And that works for a lot of different podcasters. And um, I'm too rigid in my podcasting ways in some
No,
aspect.
you're organized, man, and it works for you because everyone has a blueprint for themselves, right? So like what you do may not work for me, and what I do may not work for you, but there are some similarities. There are things that we can learn from one another, and things that we learn like lessons wise, like because this whole thing is trial and error. So like whatever may not work for me, it's gonna work for you, could work for you, or may not. It's one of those things. Podcasts are tricky.
Yeah, and I think this is the value of doing the collaborations and allowing you to get into the guest seat for once. And like,
Yeah, that's
because
new.
because like when I was able to guest on different podcasts, it kind of takes a lot of pressure off too. You can just say and do whatever you want to do, and you just allow the host to kind of guide you where you want to go. But you know content, so you know how to like fill in the gaps and carry a conversation as well. And it's helping making their life easier on top of it. But it's an interesting balance that you do between a host and a guest on a podcast with you guys and your content. Did you ever worry at first with creating the podcast of like how people are going to perceive you and how people are going to judge you on social media?
Yes and no. It was more or less like, what do people want to see? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to grasp an audience and you're trying to get a message across, but also trying to help those people that are coming on the podcast to then maybe advertise themselves or send a message. So like effectively, and I say that like you're always trying to grasp the audience. Perspective wise, how people like what people think of us. Personally, like me and Zach are the same in that aspect. Like I struggled with that when I was a kid. It was a lot of like imagery issue. I was like, what are people gonna think of me about what I wear or like how I play? Like I was always so like stuck in my ways about that. And I grew out of that because of the military. It was like it doesn't matter. Just perform how you perform, do what makes you happy, and this is how you're gonna keep succeeding. You think if you keep stressing about what other people think about you, it's just gonna hold you up. And that's Zach's mindset and viewpoint as well. So like when it came to the podcast, like we were talking about earlier, those negative comments, they didn't phase us. It's not until we started seeing the positive reinforcement and through the positive comments and like people reaching out and be like, hey, like you guys are doing a great job. I like what you're doing. Could we get some business together or whatever? Or even like the people who don't, and they're just like, hey, like you guys are doing a great job, period. Like that means a lot. So on the back end of that, yeah, no, it's just podcasts are they could be interesting. They could be tricky. And like, yeah, it is one of those things where you have to advertise yourself and you have to advertise your podcast, but do it do it carelessly. And I say that because you are like it's inevitable that you're gonna get haters. It's inevitable.
Yeah, were you a big social media person prior to starting this?
Uh, yes and no. I mean, the military also took that away from me in a sense because like I want to be pretty private because of my job. But at the back into that, like high school, yeah, because everyone is in high school, especially like the
Yeah.
athletes. Like, oh, let me post this game picture, and so yeah, I was one of those people. Like, I had to I had to have a photographer there. Like, I was like my mom was my photographer. I was like, you have to take pictures. Like, I need pictures for my Instagram. Or like, I just need these even to hold on to now because now I look at it, I'm like, damn, high school is so fun, man. Sports are fun.
I was very glad that we had at our football games there was a parent that would volunteer, and he did it for several years until his kids graduated. Would always go to every sport, photograph everything with his professional ass camera, and like I have great photos of just playing sports, and I know a lot of people who went to Seekonk had amazing photos because he was always on the sidelines recording and taking like photos of every game, and it's stuff like that you don't get to appreciate till later in life when the memories and stuff pop up on Facebook. It's like I'm glad I get to have this these different pictures and stuff to remember because I do also have fond memories of high school. I do like the people that were there, and I never really associated with the crowd of people who's like, I hate where I'm from. I can't wait to get out of here, and
Yeah,
then they
no,
never
me
fucking
neither.
leave. It's like those type of people I just don't understand because like, have you never been anywhere else? Do you not know what else is out there? Because this is pretty fucking good. Like what we have in this community and the people that are here,
It's perfect.
it's good. Like travel. If you have never traveled, you're never going to understand that concept because you'll be like, these people are annoying. This drama. Like, you want to know real drama? You want to know real struggle? Go to these different countries. Go down south. Go to some of those ghettos and those hood areas. Like, there's bad places down south. There's bad places in this country, even in this area. Like, go to those areas before you start bitching and complaining about where you're from.
Yeah, you need to be truthful. You need to be grateful, like what you have, and a lot of people don't understand that until then they start seeing the adversity that other people go through because they're so stuck in their own ways. I say this all the time. It's like a hollow perspective, man. It's just like you're only seeing what you're allowing yourself to see because you're so stuck on how you feel, not how other people feel, because you're not even thinking about that. And like you said, get out of your comfort zone, go to these places, experience these things, and then come back and tell me what you think
Exactly.
because it's gonna change.
Not enough people do that. Is like to remove themselves from their environment because when you remove the comfort of your environment, you're really gonna have to do some character development. You're really gonna have to learn some new things and create some new perspectives because when you're placed into that different environment, it's going to change you for better or for worse. But you get to ultimately choose which way you go with that development because it's up to you. You're an individual who has conscious awareness that can make decisions.
Absolutely.
You get to decide. And a lot of people let life decide for them. And I guess you can get into this discussion of like, do you let life just happen or do you go after it? And it's a difficult balance. I think there's some of it that you can't control, but then there's a lot that you do control, and it's up to what you want to put into life. And when I look at someone like yourself with the podcast, like it doesn't get to where it is unless you guys get it there. Like you could have all the guests in the world and they could all be great, but it's up to you guys to get the equipment. It's up to you guys to show up to the studio. It's up to you guys to network and get these people onto your podcast.
Absolutely.
And it's up to you to get them comfortable enough to share their stories on your platform. And for you guys to have done it for, you said about 2 years going on.
2 years in April, yeah.
And did you guys hit 100 episodes yet? Because I know you guys were like really close.
Really, really close now. Actually, like it's rendered. It just needs to be edited, but it's coming up.
And that milestone when you guys finally post that and share, because obviously you've recorded it, you've done the episode, but like to finally like hit episode 100, like man, that feeling is going to be something else, because you could take pride in that. Like that's a lot of hard work and a lot of hours put into that. And as a podcaster, you deserve that credit to get that credit as well, and to have gone through all these different errors, and probably you've had different things go wrong in podcasts and as they do, but to hit episode 100, that's an amazing accomplishment. Like not a lot of people do that, and you guys do deserve recognition for doing that. And I'm glad that I've been able to get you on a guest, and I'll get Zach on as a guest, and I'll come appear on your podcast as well. And I'm very excited for that. But just this kind of goes into this, what we were talking about this entire episode of camaraderie, this networking aspect of things. And through content, it allows you to do that. And I never would have thought that when I first started this. I just was like, I'll podcast, I'll talk to people I know and just whatever.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going and going. So like when I look at you guys, what do you think you've been able to take away or learn from having all these different conversations with people?
Perspective is definitely one. Perspective is one. It's also held me to a higher standard in regards to accountability, being deliberate with what needs to be said sometimes, because sometimes, I mean, people can say some reckless stuff, right? But you want to also hold them to that standard where it's like, hey man, or even ask them like, why do you think that way? Because sometimes it might just be something that they learned early on. Sometimes it may be something that we have to talk about off camera, or some things like that can't be said or shouldn't be said based off like careers or just like, even if it's just like too extreme, right? Like it's definitely taught me how to communicate better. Networking is big, but really the biggest takeaway, other than all the things that I personally developed from, was just now being able to have that community and have that camaraderie. Like you said, like it goes, a lot of things in my life now, I see that now I'm talking about it realistically, is like they're all coming together. So like the military has always brought me camaraderie, sports has always brought me camaraderie, but now also the podcast and the community within the podcast brings camaraderie. And it's like, it's tough. Like getting past that 10 episode hump, like you were talking about earlier, it's difficult, because how many people do you actually see with the consistency like you, who's done this for 5 years and 175 episodes in? Like it's a lot, and people don't see that. But it's nice to now talk about it and be here with you, because we share the same, like we share the same struggle. We've shared the trial and errors. We've seen what it's like to be here and go through the setup, and now have to financially invest in cameras, lights, like soundboards, MacBooks, and now push out merchandise. Like it's a difficult process. A lot of people don't see that.
They just see the end product. They see it on YouTube. They see on Apple and Spotify. Oh, there's another podcast this week. Good for him. It's like,
yeah,
they don't see the amount of time and effort that goes into this. And this is why I personally always like the episodes I do with other podcasters, because like you guys you get it. Like it's not easy to do this every week and then hope your guest doesn't cancel, or hope that they need to reschedule. And you have those, and like it just is what it is. And learning to get over that hump is like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes I'll do a solo, but like luckily over the years, if someone cancels, they cancel. Like I'm not going to force myself to make an episode just to hit a number. Like if I feel called to talk about something, I'll do that. But if I don't, I'm not doing that. Like, and getting myself to that place took some years to like not like stress over I need an episode to go out. And because obviously I was telling you my turnaround is pretty quick. So like when I don't have one, I don't have anything else. So that part people don't probably get either, is if they cancel, you're kind of fucking me over. And like, and it's not like your problem to stress about, it's mine. But like it is frustrating that when that does happen, is someone that you schedule weeks in advance will cancel on you. And obviously, depending on the person, I'll believe it. But there's people that just something comes up, they're just fucking lying.
Yeah, and that goes back to like what we were talking about earlier with sports. Is like if you're taking your sport seriously and you're putting in the work, then obviously you're going to hold that to more value, where it's the same thing with the podcast. Someone cancels and it literally happened today, like booked weeks, almost a month in advance, right? And someone cancels and you're like, damn, like it starts to become a point like where you start to think that people don't take it seriously. Like people are not taking your podcast seriously, or people are not, it even relates to like businesses. People don't take your business seriously. And it's like for some people, like this is like where their money comes from. This is where their happiness comes from. This is where their sense of purpose comes from. And like you said, like it fucks you in a way, because you're taking that away from me. You're taking that away from my podcast. So it's like on the back end, why am I going to want to help you again? Unless it genuinely is like a real excuse and a completely understandable, like we're super transparent, but like after the second time and like after we reach out, because me and you do the same thing, we confirm. I confirm with you a week, 2 weeks prior, like literally the day prior and that day we confirm. And sometimes like people don't respond till that day and be like, hey, I can't make it.
You already know when they're not responding.
Like, all right, like I already had this feeling, bro.
It's like fucking back in the day when you're trying to talk to a girl and like they're not responding. You're like, she about to ghost me. Like, it's done. It's the same thing. As soon as someone's not responding to me, I'm like, they're about to cancel.
Absolutely.
And like, I mean, I've had someone completely do a fucking no-show, just not even fucking. And this is someone that I knew, went to school with, and it was a second cancellation, and then hit me up way later to say they couldn't do it. I was like, man, get the fuck out of here. Never talk to them again. Like, I have a 2-strike policy. It's like, I don't do 3 strikes. You fuck up twice, it's done.
Yeah,
because one time, I get it. A second time, maybe we'll see. Like, depending on what it is. A third time, you're not even getting that third chance. Like, I won't even invite you back. And it's like, so if you've been on the podcast and you need to reschedule, I never hold that against anyone, because you've already rewarded me with being a guest. Like, you don't owe me anything. Someone that might have come on and I've scheduled them and they cancel, and then I schedule them and they cancel again, you probably might not be able to come back on the podcast, because like that could have been a guest spot for someone else.
Exactly.
And people don't, it's going to what you're saying too, is people just don't get the amount of effort that you're putting in to do this stuff. And it's definitely a frustrating thing, especially when it's like local. It's like you think that people would care about local, but as soon as you start doing it, you realize they don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like me personally, and like everything we've stressed with every single episode that we've had, even like now, like even with like we had a professional UFC fighter on.
I saw that
one of the big things was like community, like you were saying earlier, and you like we totally agree. Giving back to your community. If I then have the blueprint to now make other people successful, I'm gonna bring it back to my community and I'm gonna make that known, and I'm gonna help people then get to that. And a lot of people don't do that, because a lot of people first don't even care that you left. First of all, and I'm not saying like you have to care that you left, but then don't care if I come back successful. Now you want to know, because then it's like after I give you that information, or after I ask you to come on my podcast and you don't. Then it's like, where are we really standing? Like, how much do you really care?
Yeah, it's just, that's where it becomes very difficult with people, is like their level of interest in what you do and getting them to buy in. And it goes back to self, though. It's like you have to buy into yourself. You have to believe into yourself. We are getting to the end of the podcast. I do want to ask you one more question before I get to that last question, is the networking stuff. How have your networking skills improved, and how do you approach scheduling guests? Because obviously it can be kind of daunting at first to reach out to people cold, like just cold cut, just reach out, hey, do you want to be a guest on the podcast? Like, how did you improve your skills, and how is the process for you to network to get guests?
Yeah, so first of all, like the big thing is like me and Zach have 3 calendars, like no word of a lie. One's at the studio that's on paper that we need to physically see, and then in order to put it in our notes, and then also we have a Google Calendar, because like we're just like, obviously Google Calendar gives you the notifications, right? That you have a podcast in a week. This is who it's with. This is a podcast in 2 weeks. So those are like my mental reminders. Okay, send out the text to make sure they're going to come on. But then I also have them in the notes. All right, cool. These are the names. But then I have it also on the calendar in person to be like, okay, this is what we have on paper. This is the days that we can't take the podcast. Cool, because like that's just the way that we learn, the way we do things. In regards to reaching out and networking, it's really just as simple as like, I'm a brother guy. Like, I'm all about the brotherhood. So I'll be like, hey, brother. Like, you see it here today. Like, I'm like, you're good, brother. Whatever. Like, it's fine. That's just who I am. like reach out. Hey, brother, if I'm looking at your content or if I'm looking at your sports, like I'll look into you. Hey, I like what you're doing. I seen this. I seen that you were on that. Cool. Just wanted to know if you'd be willing to come up on the podcast and talk about this, that, the third, or maybe even just come on the podcast soon and talk about your journey, your life. Or hey, even with you, like, do you want to do a collaboration? We really like your work. We like the fact that you're talking about mental health. We're really big mental advocates ourselves, and we just want to be able to network more and build a stronger community because that's what it's about. Like at the end of the day, here in Rhode Island, here in Massachusetts, here in New England, like we're graced with amazing people, amazing athletes. We just need to get out of our own way. And the only way that we can do that is as like, I think that us as a podcast community, us as interviewers, us as whatever people want to consider us, like we are the people to open that door. And that's how I feel about it. That's how Zach feels about it. We're the person to open that door. We're the community to open that door. We're the people that give others a voice because perspective from the outside cannot be really who they are. And people don't know what they've been through. People don't know how they feel. How are they going to know if we don't allow them to give them that voice?
I feel the same way. We're new media.
Absolutely.
We get to shine the light into the cool stuff that people do in this area, because otherwise it would be overlooked and people wouldn't notice. And that's part of the responsibility I carry with this podcast. Every episode that I recorded, I look at, like I was telling you about the aesthetic of the Instagram, and I look at it as like almost like Pokemon cards or trading cards. Like every
It's
new
fun.
episode is like another card that I acquired, and it's another story that pushes me to keep going, because like it's not just a responsibility to myself, but I have a responsibility to everyone that's ever been on this podcast to carry this forward, because now they trusted me to carry their story. I have to carry their story, and I chose that responsibility, and it's up to me to keep this going, and who knows how long it goes for, and I hope that it keeps going for as long as it can. And obviously I'm almost close to getting to that 5 years, almost 200 episodes, and I'm still cooking, and that's the ultimate like goal, is to just keep on cooking and keep on trucking. So I think between the different networking skills and doing all these different podcasts, I think it's a good way to keep pushing everything forward. And I think you're right with the way that we are the door that has to open for everyone to hear all these great stories. We are getting towards the end of the podcast. I do have that one more question for you, but I want to give you the chance. Is there anything that you didn't get a chance to say or want to say before I get to that last question?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. I just always like to give people that opportunity.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
For the last question, what would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion?
I'd say don't let anyone else dictate what they want to do. Do it, send it, like understand that if it is what you want morally and ethically, and then there may be second, third ripple effects, but if it makes you happy and it makes the people immediately around you happy and it's for your benefit and their benefit, do it. Because at the end of the day, like 5-10 years from now, really think about who it's going to be affecting. If it doesn't affect those people, if it affects things greatly after that, just send it. Like it'll be fine. People's perspectives drive a lot of things on how others can maybe even like, you even see with trades in football, like I don't want him to go somewhere, and the fans start to get to know, like, damn, I don't know if I should go somewhere. That's my rival team, but are cool. But are you at the end of your contract? Are they giving you more money? Is it for your family? Like, is this for you? Is this your benefit? Like, those are things that really need to be weighed. So again, always know you're going to bounce back when you hit the ground. Like, there's nowhere else to go but up. Rock bottom, and the only place to go is up. And then, yeah, just send it, dude. Like, I get choked up thinking about it because, like, a lot of people, and I've seen it, like, wasted potential. Like, you just need to do it. Don't waste your potential. We talked about it earlier, like, those what ifs. Like, you're going to be on your deathbed one day, and you're not taking anything to the grave with you other than those what ifs. Those are going to be your last dying thoughts, likely, other than, like, your family, is those what ifs. What if I did this? Don't live in the what ifs. Live in the do's. Talk about the experience. Let other people learn from that experience.
100%. I definitely agree with that. And just take the chance. Just take the fucking chance.
Like your tattoo.
Take
the chance.
Junior, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. This has
Thank you for having
been
me.
fantastic, and just getting to know you. And I'm excited about coming on your podcast as well. Feel free to plug your podcast right now, whether you want to look at that camera or that camera. It's up to
Low
you.
Gravity Uncensored podcast. Jared will be on here soon. Can't wait to have him. It's going to be a great time. Zach will be on here as well. Can't wait to hear what he has to say. definitely want to do this again. This was great.
Absolutely. I look forward to future collabs and even sending a lot of guests your way as well.
Absolutely. We'll do the same.
For you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. Check out the carrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll. Should pop up right for you. And again, if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So, till next time, guys. Peace.